With the American political system showing its cracks and weaknesses more with each passing day, and the American people losing faith more and more with their elected officials, now is the winter of our discontent. In this, the age of social reform and political instability, perhaps it is time to re-evaluate a system of not just government, but society and culture, a system that has only recently become fashionable to decry. But the first step in seeking a replacement form of government is evaluating if the current form is indeed in need of replacement, and if that is the case out of so many forms, which is to be adopted. In the case of the United States of America, the Democratic Republic experiment has been a fascinating yet, ultimately, an unsatisfactory one. With its ever-increasing rise in population, the presumed individual voice and vote has become diluted. The Republic's officials, at least in the case of the states, are too easily infiltrated. Senators and representatives hold allegiances to countries that they were either born in or are paid off by, or to religions contrary to the ideals and tenets of the Western world. Some even tout the very fact in our faces, knowing that few have the conviction to truly stand up to these foreign agents. And with political parties growing further and further apart, so too are the culture and basic values that define this nation. Elections that used to end, at least for the most part, in celebration of the election process, now almost exclusively are preluded with divided families and vicious arguments. Following any election now are riots and destruction, and ultimately a nation divided, with officials invariably setting their sights on re-election and the retention of power, instead of on the needs and unification of the people. But as we shall see, where the offspring of democracy and republic are hate, division, and greed, monarchies give birth to stability, culture, and honor. The name of monarchy's firstborn is stability. According to Sir Glubb, governments can only hope for a couple hundred years in lifespan, and then the nation will reinvent itself, adopting a new government and set of core beliefs and values. Look to Athens, or to Rome's ever-shifting nature, until its fulfillment in imperium. Although, as with Solon, and you may count Julius Caesar in this point if you wish, some dictatorships are accepted, even longingly embraced. But generally, one only has to say the word dictator, and the guillotines are erected in the town square, the unwashed masses shouting liberty, equality, fraternity. But even in the case of Solon, a mere couple centuries are sufficient to bring it to its bloody conclusion. The same, it is true, usually stands for monarchies, but only for the monarchy to bounce back in full force. History provides examples from Spain and England, as well as France in her monarchy's return after the Bonaparte period. Ideas and beliefs require a stronghold to champion them. Vision requires a visionary. Thus, the lifespan of a culture or a set of goodly ideals is linked to the nation's lifespan. Ergo, seeking to create every chance of preserving a nation's lifespan is of vital importance, and history seems to point to monarchies as the best chance of achieving that end. Monarchies put a permanent face to a government, or at least to a permanent rallying cry. How many times has the tide of battle been turned by the appearance of the king on the battlefield? One only needs to read the speeches of Alexander, and can continue that line of speeches throughout history. A king, sharing in the perils of his men, is a far more unifying figure than an elected official, for some men will rally behind him, and the others will scorn him, at least in their hearts. And if he is loved by all, let them raise him on their shields, and their effect is permanent. Not so for a republic, which is as shifting as the sands. Let them say, "Ah, here is one who casts his fortune amongst our own, one who would die for us, and counts it to his honor to die with us, not only in word, but in deed." Let the current King of Spain serve as example. In this past week, as of this writing, disastrous flooding ravaged Payporta, Spain, destroying lives, families, life work. The people were in an uproar, threatening those in charge, elected representatives and royals alike. The prime minister, an elected official, fled the region while the king and his family, risking the dangerous mobs, aided in the work and offered comfort and reassurance. The king was dressed in jeans and windbreaker, work boots caked in mud as he sludged through the city, laboring alongside his people. Whenever job span and time in the public eye is only for a few years, you are responsible to yourself and to your own private goals and agendas. When you and your descendants are responsible for a nation's health, irrevocably linked to a nation's destiny, there is true duty seen and realized. For man is by his very nature fickle and unvirtuous. He will seek his own profit, unless societal and other forces prompt him to do otherwise. In the absence of permanence, no true consequences apply. Consider Joe Biden handing the White House back to Donald Trump, only after ordering the slaughter of chickens in the name of avian flu, for the sole purpose of sabotaging his opponent's goal of cheaper groceries. And where men are forbidden to honor a king, they honor millionaires, athletes, or film stars. For spiritual nature, like bodily nature, will be served. Deny it food, and it will gobble poison. C.S. Lewis. All men seek things to honor. It is their nature. So let them honor one who honors virtue and duty. A king is the most reliable and obvious example in this mortal sphere. Perhaps the most important asset a monarchy provides is a lasting cultural legacy. A dynasty creates a shared and binding identity for a nation, saving it from joining a gray lump of nations that are indiscernible one from another. Especially in the case of America, which is built on diversity, there must be some sort of cohesive, holding the national identity together. For where there is only diversity, a nation cannot help but fall. One of the first steps a nation must take on its path to greatness is crafting its own stable and unique culture. A dynasty provides a constant face of a country as opposed to a line of constantly shifting faces, all of which hate its successor. Divided parties equal a divided culture equal a divided nation. In addition to a permanent, or at least longer-lasting continuation of cultural legacy in the shape of a dynasty, a successive line of like-minded monarchs brings true economic and legislative impressions. In the United States, one party, whether in the Senate or a majority run Supreme Court, enacts a change. But once the other party is in power, the first order of business is to reverse that change. Politics becomes less a tool of the people and more an ever-divisive game of tug-of-war between what must ultimately become oligarchs. The same can be said not just of legislative change, but of traditions, of social changes. It is no coincidence that every toppling of the monarchy in the AD period is followed, or in tandem with, the overthrowing of the Christian religion in that country. I cite France and Russia. All traditional Western ideals and sensibilities work together in a well-manufactured machine, a machine that seeks to emulate God's will and design for mankind. We have thus far considered the benefits of a monarchical system, but it is paramount to understand that all man-made systems, including the monarchy, are by nature fallible and imperfect. Let us now consider the drawbacks or the other popular government models. In a pure democracy, the people are the voice. The main drawback of the system, although at first blush seemingly just, is that most people possess voices not worth hearing. Indeed, they are dangerous to hear, perilous to a nation's well-being. For man is a herd creature, prone to mob rule. To think that one person's voice should be heard and valued as much as the next person's voice is decidedly ridiculous. Would you allow a child his own ways and desires in deference to a wiser and more experienced adult? And most people are incapable of thinking for themselves, especially in this era where celebrity voices are valued higher than the ancients. Of course, in this age, with the rise of AI thinking taking the place of man's own reasoning, cognitive functions must ever decrease as well. Finally, all men are incapable of being virtuous by their own will. So why then allow a group of naturally perverse children to govern themselves? And why give wolves the same voice as the sheep? Where now is the beauty of democracy, a nation governed by fools and scoundrels? Corruption always runs rampant, eventually, in democracy, with a man of considerable wealth paying off, or a man with an army threatening voters. So much for democracy. As for a republic, there is the already discussed impermanency, which is irrevocably associated with it. Inevitably, parties will break out, leading to the conclusion that a republic, by its very nature, is the epitome of divisive government. Elected officials will look to amass all the power and capital they can before their term ends, as again previously discussed. They know that they ultimately cannot be held responsible. The idea of lobbyists from non-elected officials has only made this easier. Perhaps the most substantial argument against a republic is how it can affect a just official. Consider an honest, newly elected official. He is a Christian, and his job is to represent the voices of the people who elected him. The people voice approval on a subject that is against his own morals or religious persuasions, say abortion. Does he vote in favor of abortion, doing his duty as a representative but disallowing the law of God? Or does he fail the people, fail to be their voice, but doing the right thing in the eyes of God? Remember, he has sworn his duty to the people before God. Or a nation at loggerheads, where both parties cancel any progress by the other, merely out of spite. Any system in which the people have, or seem to have, a prominent voice is by nature divisive. A flock of sheep require a shepherd, and a flock requires a single constant shepherd that they know they can trust. So then, what now? The die has been cast. America's government is not a monarchy. Is this essay written in vain? With the will and good favor of God on our side, nothing is in vain. That which is right and just must needs prevail. Government is a tool of the people to be wielded by the people to their own good end. And when a tool is broken or blunted, you must cast it aside for a working one. When a government evolves into its own entity, holding itself accountable rather than answering to the people it claims to represent, it is just and right to put down that entity. The government is a tool to be used, not an individual, living thing to be protected for the sake of itself. And what are the signs of a government's evolution into its own entity? Namely, when the people fear the government's impact on their own private lives, when it has no moral or just cause to do so. When a government creates departments by itself, without the consent of the people and at the people's expense or peril, usually extending the powers of the government. Only then should a government be deposed. And only after seeking the good counsel and guidance of God, for by his will are governments established, maintained, and dethroned. If God is not on our side, who can stand against him? And if God is on our side, and our cause is just, our names will surely be writ in fire across the sky, for all the future to see. I have written in defense of a monarchy, for the reason that I believe it to be the greater system in stability, in virtue, and in honor. A system for the people in that the ruler's good is inevitably linked to the people's good. Of course, as previously stated, no system is perfect, but a father is needed in a home for a family, to serve as the representative of God. And what is a nation but a large family, with a king as its father? The perfect system would be one where God reigns here on earth, but that cannot be at the moment. And so, as he has a chosen representative in the family, namely a father, he must have one in a country, namely a king. For God is not divisible. He is not so many different parties vying for control. He is one decisive and just voice, wielding all authority. And with the blessing and decree of God, a monarchy must be established in these United States of America.